ex-wife was pregnant, a prominent belly, her maid uniform stained with cleaning supplies, her hair pulled back in a hasty bun. She was on her knees, scrubbing the floor of my penthouse in the Upper East Side, her hands red and swollen, while I watched from the hallway, unseen. It had been 4 years since I'd last seen her. 4 years since I'd signed the divorce papers without batting an eye, since I'd left her alone in some rental apartment in Queens while I built a tech empire that turned me into one of the youngest and richest CEOs in New York City. And now, here she was, pregnant, cleaning my apartment. Her name was Julia. She was 32, and I had no idea I was about to discover the most painful truth of my life. If you've ever felt you had everything under control, that your choices were the right ones, that leaving someone behind was the smartest decision you ever made, this story will make you question every second of that certainty, because what I discovered that day didn't just change my life, it changed who I thought I was. Before I continue this story, I want to ask you for one simple thing. If you enjoy hearing real stories that touch the heart and make us reflect on the choices we make, on the price we pay for success, please subscribe to this channel. Every week we bring you stories like this from people who have been through situations that you might be experiencing right now, stories that show that no one is alone in their doubts and regrets. Your subscription helps me continue to bring these stories, and I promise each one will be worth your time. My name is Raphael, but everyone calls me Rafa. I'm 35, my hair is always perfectly cut. I wear custom-made Italian suits, a Swiss watch on my left wrist, a 4 square-foot penthouse overlooking Central Park, and a bank account with more zeros than I could ever imagine as a kid. I founded an artificial intelligence startup at 28 alone, in a rented office in a co-working space in Midtown, working 18 hours a day, sleeping on the office couch, eating instant ramen to save every penny. 3 years later, I sold part of the company to an American firm for a sum that changed my life overnight. I bought the penthouse, traded my beat-up Honda for a Mercedes, hired a personal assistant, a driver, a cleaning crew. I became a different person, but it wasn't always like this. When I met Julia, I was 25, working as a freelance programmer, earning $500 a month, living in a studio apartment in a less than glamorous part of town and taking 2 subway lines to get to work. She was a pharmacy assistant, working the night shift, with a smile that lit up the entire store and infinite patience for my crazy tech ideas. We met because I went into the pharmacy almost every day to buy energy drinks, and she started teasing me, saying I was going to have a heart attack if I kept drinking them. One day, I worked up the courage, asked her out for coffee, and she said yes. 6 months later, we were living together. Julia believed in me when no one else did. When I quit my steady job to try and start my own company, everyone called me crazy. My parents said I was throwing my stability away. My friends laughed in my face. Except her. Julia picked up extra shifts at the pharmacy to make up for the money I wasn't bringing in anymore. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning, pack lunches for the whole week, take care of the apartment, pay the bills, and still come home from work with that tired but genuine smile, hug me, and say everything would be okay. Those were tough times. We ate rice and eggs almost every day for dinner. We didn't have money for movies, for going out to eat, for anything. But we had each other. Julia would stroke my hair when I was up programming until the early hours, bring me coffee, stay awake with me just for company. She didn't understand a thing about technology, but she understood me. She knew when I was stuck on a problem, when I needed silence, when I needed a hug. She was my rock. I promised her that when the company took off, we'd travel the world, we'd have a big house, we'd have everything we never had. She'd kiss my forehead and say she didn't need any of that, she just wanted me to be happy. But success, when it came too fast and changed me in ways I didn't expect. When the money really started rolling in, I changed. I started attending business events, networking dinners, penthouse parties, where everyone talked about investments, trips to Miami, imported cars. Julia didn't fit in those places. She tried. Bless her heart. Bought a cheap dress, did her hair, tried to talk to the other women, but her discomfort was obvious. She was too simple, too down-to-earth. She didn't know how to talk about designer handbags, French wines, or resorts in the Maldives. And I started to feel ashamed of her, ashamed of the woman who held my hand when I had nothing. I started making excuses to go to events alone. Said it was work-related, that she'd be bored, that it was better for her to rest. Julia never complained. She just became quieter and quieter, more and more distant, as if she were fading away. I started coming home later and later. Stopped having dinner with her. Stopped asking about her day. Stopped hugging her. We became two strangers sharing the same roof. And then I met Mariana, a lawyer, 28, impeccably blonde hair, a gym-toned body, designer clothes, an imported car. She attended the same events as me, spoke my language, understood my world. We started dating. I lied to Julia, told her I was in meetings on business trips. Julia knew, of course, she knew, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at me with those sad, tired eyes, as if waiting for the day I'd finally have the courage to tell the truth. And that day came on a Tuesday, October 12th. I got home. Julia was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. She didn't ask where I'd been, didn't yell, didn't cry. She just said, her voice firm but broken, "You don't love me anymore, do you?" And I, the coward that I was, just nodded. She took a deep breath, wiped away a tear that insisted on falling, and said, "Then go. Go live the life you want. I won't hold you back." 3 weeks later, we signed the divorce papers. I gave her a sum I thought was generous at the time, $50,000, and I thought I was being fair, that I was doing the right thing. Julia took the money, thanked me, and left my life. I didn't call to see how she was, didn't text, didn't ask mutual friends. I just erased her from my life like the 6 years we spent together never happened. I was with Mariana for a year. We traveled Europe, dined at the finest restaurants, hit the most exclusive parties. But something was always missing. Mariana was beautiful, intelligent, successful. But she wasn't Julia. She didn't look at me the way Julia did. She didn't truly know me. We broke up over a silly argument about which resort to pick for New Year's Eve. After her, there were others, models, businesswomen, influencers. None of them lasted. I'd always find a flaw, an incompatibility, an excuse. Deep down, I knew none of them were her. 4 years went by. My company grew even more. I opened branches in 3 states, graced the cover of business magazines, gave lectures at universities. On the outside, I was the picture of success. Inside, I was hollow. I came home every day to a huge, silent penthouse, ate alone, slept alone, woke up alone. The housekeeper quit because her husband got a job in another city. My secretary told me she'd hired a replacement through a reputable agency. I barely paid attention, just told her to handle it. And that's how, on a Thursday, February 22nd at 9 in the morning, I opened my bedroom door to get a glass of water and saw her, Julia, in uniform, pregnant, cleaning the floor in my living room. The world stopped. My heart raced. My hands started to sweat. She hadn't seen me yet. I went back into the bedroom, closed the door slowly, sat on the bed, and tried to process what I'd just seen. Julia, here, in my house, pregnant, with whose baby? For how long? Why was she working as a housekeeper? What happened to the $50,000 I gave her? The questions hammered in my head. I ran a hand over my face, took a deep breath, and decided I needed to talk to her. But when I opened the door again, she was gone. My secretary called me half an hour later, asked if I liked the new housekeeper. I said yes, she could continue. But what I really wanted was a chance to talk to Julia, to understand what had happened to her. The following week, I adjusted my routine. I started working from home on Thursdays, the day Julia came to clean. The first time we saw each other face to face, she froze. The mop slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. She turned pale, then red, and her eyes, filled with tears, she fought to hold back. I tried to keep my composure, but my voice came out shaky. "Julia," I said. She didn't respond. She just picked up the mop, lowered her head, and continued cleaning. "Julia, please, we need to talk," I insisted. She stopped, took a deep breath, and finally looked at me. And that look, my God, that look cut me in half. There was pain there, but also a strength I'd never seen before. "There's nothing to talk about, Raphael," she said, her voice different, firmer, more mature. "I'm here to work, that's all." I swallowed hard. "But you're pregnant. You can't be working like this, exerting yourself so much." She let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, now you care about me? After 4 years of not a single word?" She was right. She had every right to be angry, to hate me. "I'm sorry," was all I could manage to say. Julia shook her head, finished cleaning the living room, and left without another word. But I couldn't stop thinking about her, that belly, that worn uniform, those red, swollen hands. What had happened to her? I started to investigate. Discreetly, I asked my secretary to get me her full profile from the employment agency. I found out she lived in a working-class neighborhood in the south of the city, an address that GPS showed as a low-income housing complex. I discovered she worked in 4 different houses during the week to make ends meet. I found out she lost her job at the pharmacy 2 years ago because the chain closed several branches, and I discovered that the father of the child wasn't listed, a blank field. That gnawed at me. Where was the man who had gotten her pregnant? Why was she alone? Why did she have to work like this? Pregnant, putting herself at risk? I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. Every time I tried to talk, she cut me off, said she didn't need pity, that she was managing on her own. Until one day, the 3rd week, she got sick. I was in my home office, working on my laptop, when I heard a noise in the kitchen. I ran in and found Julia sitting on the floor, pale, cold, sweating, her hand on her stomach. "Julia!" I yelled, kneeling beside her. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" She tried to get up, but couldn't. "Just a dizzy spell," she mumbled. "It'll pass." "No, it won't pass," I said firmly. "I'm taking you to the hospital now." She tried to protest, but I didn't give her a chance. I picked her up, ignored her weak protests, put her in the back seat of the car, and drove to the nearest emergency room. At the hospital, we found out she had high blood pressure, was dehydrated and malnourished. The doctor looked at her with a mixture of pity and disapproval. "You need to rest. Heavy work at this stage of pregnancy can put the baby at risk," she said. Julia lowered her head. "I don't have a choice, doctor," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "I need to work to eat." The doctor sighed, wrote a prescription for vitamins and rest, and discharged her with instructions to return the following week for follow-up. In the car, driving back to her place, the silence was deafening. I was driving, she was staring out the window until I couldn't take it anymore. "Julia, let me help you," I said. She turned to me, and in her eyes was a cold anger I'd never seen. "Now you want to help?" she asked. "After abandoning me, replacing me, throwing me away like trash, now you want to help?" I gripped the steering wheel tightly. I know I was an idiot. I know I hurt you, but I can't change the past. I just want you and the baby to be okay." Julia let out that humorless laugh again. "You know what's funny, Raphael? You think $50,000 was a lot of money. You thought you were being generous, but you have no idea what it's like to live on that in a city like São Paulo when you have no one." My stomach clenched. "What happened?" I asked, softly. And then Julia started to tell me. She told me that when we broke up, she took the $50,000 and tried to start over. She rented a small apartment, tried to find a job, but discovered that at 28, without a college degree and no experience outside the pharmacy, doors didn't open easily. She had interviews, sent out resumes, knocked on dozens of doors. Nothing. The money started to dwindle. Rent, food, electricity, water, gas. It all sucked away, that 50,000 like sand slipping through fingers. She managed to get a job as a supermarket cashier, but the pay was terrible and the money just wasn't enough to cover everything. In 6 months, the 50,000 had evaporated. She had to leave her apartment and moved into a rented room in an old lady's house. When the drugstore chain closed its branches and she lost her cashier job, everything fell apart. She was unemployed for 3 months, eating bread with margarine, wearing the clothes she could wash in the lady's utility sink, until an acquaintance recommended her for work as a housekeeper. She accepted. She needed to survive. And that's how she started cleaning houses. At first, 1 house a week, then 2, 3, 4. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning, take 3 buses, clean huge houses for rich people, come home dead tired, and do it all over again the next day. "And the baby?" I asked, my voice choked up. Julia was silent for a long time. Then she took a deep breath and said, in a voice so low I could barely hear her, "The father disappeared when he found out I was pregnant." My heart broke. She told me she'd met a guy a year ago. He was a salesman at an electronics store, charming, attentive. They dated for 6 months. Julia thought she'd finally found someone who would stay, someone she could build a life with. When she found out she was pregnant, she told him full of hope. He smiled, hugged her, said everything would be okay. The next day, he blocked her on everything. Phone, social media, vanished. Julia went to the store where he worked and found out he'd quit, and no one knew where he'd gone. She was alone. Again, pregnant, broke, with no support. She considered abortion, but didn't have the courage. She thought about giving the baby up for adoption, but every time she felt the baby move inside her, her heart softened. She decided she would have this child alone, that she could handle it, even if it meant working until the last day of her pregnancy. "Julia, I'm so sorry," I said, and the words felt so empty, so useless. She wiped a tear that rolled down her cheek. "You don't need to be sorry, Raphael. You're living your life. I'm living mine. We just bumped into each other again by chance." When we got in front of her building, an old, faded apartment complex, she opened the car door and got out without looking back. I stayed there, frozen, watching her walk up the stairs and disappear. And for the first time in 4 years, I cried. If this story is affecting you, imagine what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories like this. Here, we tell real stories of people who faced the impossible, and I'm sure many of them will make you feel less alone on this journey. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where you felt your choices destroyed the life of someone you loved? Have you ever had that moment when you realized the value of a person too late? Write, "I've been there" below if this story touched you in any way. Your comment might be exactly the message someone else needed to read today to know they're not alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying every word Julia had said, every detail of her story. Guilt suffocated me. I had everything: money, success, comfort, and she had nothing. The woman who held me when I had nothing, who believed in me when no one else did, was now cleaning strangers' houses to survive, pregnant, abandoned, exhausted. And part of it was my fault. I could have stayed in touch. I could have helped more. I could have been less selfish. The next day I made a decision. I called my assistant and told her that from that day on, Julia would no longer work at my house or any other. I would pay her a fixed salary, enough for her to live with dignity, and she could rest until the baby was born. My assistant looked at me confused but didn't question it. The following Thursday, when Julia arrived at my house with her uniform and cleaning supplies, I stopped her at the door. "Julia, you're not working anymore," I said. She frowned. "What? Did I do something wrong?" "No," I replied. "You didn't do anything wrong, but I'm not going to let you kill yourself working while you're pregnant. I'm going to pay you a fixed salary every month, $5,000. You'll be able to rest, take care of yourself, take care of the baby." Julia looked at me as if I'd spoken another language. Then she shook her head firmly. "No, I don't accept." I blinked, surprised. "Why?" "Because I don't want your pity, Raphael," she said, her voice hard. "I don't want to be your charity. I'm handling this on my own, and I'll continue to." I tried to argue, but she wouldn't listen. She walked past me, went into the house, and started cleaning as usual. I stood there, feeling completely powerless. In the following days, I tried everything. I offered to pay for a better apartment for her. She refused. I offered to pay for health insurance. She refused. I offered to buy baby clothes. She refused. Julia had a fierce pride I didn't know existed. She didn't want anything from me. Until one Thursday, 3 weeks later, I got home early and found her passed out in the bathroom. My heart nearly stopped. I ran, picked her up, saw she was breathing but unconscious. I called an ambulance, but the wait was 40 minutes. I wasn't going to wait. I put her in the car again and drove to the nearest hospital like a maniac. In the ER, the doctor told me her blood pressure was dangerously high, that she was on the edge, that if she continued like this, she could have eclampsia and lose the baby or even her own life. She needed absolute rest. I looked at Julia, lying on that gurney, pale, fragile, her belly big and her face etched with exhaustion, and something inside me broke. When she woke up hours later, I was sitting beside her. She opened her eyes slowly, saw me, and tried to sit up. "Easy," I said, holding her hand. "You fainted. You're in the hospital." She closed her eyes and a tear rolled down. "I can't stop working, Raphael," she whispered. "I need the money. I have no one." I squeezed her hand and my voice came out firm, decided. "You do. You have me." Julia opened her eyes and looked at me, confused. "You're going to live with me," I said. Her eyes widened. "What?" "You're going to live in my house, in the guest room. You'll have everything you need: food, rest, a private doctor to monitor the pregnancy. You won't have to work. You won't have to worry about anything. You'll just take care of yourself and the baby." Julia shook her head, desperate. "No, Raphael, I can't accept this." "Why?" "Because I don't want to owe you anything." "You won't owe me anything," I said, my voice cracking. "Julia, I owe you everything, everything I am today. I achieved because you believed in me when I had nothing. You held my hand, paid my bills, gave me the strength to keep going, and I repaid you with abandonment. I threw you away. I was the worst human being I could possibly be. Let me do this for you, not out of pity, because I owe you." Julia started to cry, deep sobs that shook her entire body, and I cried with her. There, in that hospital room, we cried away all the pain of those 4 years together. When she calmed down, she looked me in the eye and said, her voice trembling, "Only until the baby is born. After that, I'm leaving and moving on with my life." I agreed. Anything as long as she accepted my help. 2 weeks later, Julia moved into my penthouse. The guest room was transformed into a welcoming space for her. I bought a new bed, soft sheets, comfortable pillows. I hired a nutritionist to prepare balanced meals. I scheduled appointments with a renowned obstetrician. Julia accepted it all in silence, with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. The first few days were strange. We barely spoke. She stayed in her room, I stayed in mine. We'd cross paths in the kitchen, exchange hellos and good nights, and that was it. But gradually, the barriers started to fall. One night, I was working in the living room when I heard her leave her room. She went to the kitchen, got a glass of water, and as she returned, she stopped at the living room doorway. "You're still working late," she said, her voice soft. I looked up from my laptop and smiled sheepishly. "Old habits." She gave a small smile, the first since she had returned to my life. "Remember when you used to stay up all night programming and I'd make you coffee?" My throat tightened. "I remember. You'd stay awake with me just for company." "I liked it," she said. "I liked watching you work on something you loved." We fell silent for a moment. Then I asked, hesitantly, "Want to sit for a bit?" She hesitated, but then sat on the sofa. And we talked. We talked about everything and nothing. About the old days, about how life had changed, about her fears regarding motherhood. For the first time in 4 years, I felt like I was talking to the Julia I knew. The real Julia. The weeks went by and we grew closer. I started coming home earlier to have dinner with her. We watched movies together, talked about the baby, laughed at silly things. I watched her belly grow, saw her place her hand on it and smile when the baby kicked. And I felt something growing inside me too, something I had buried a long time ago. Affection, love, regret. One day she was organizing the baby clothes I had bought, and I offered to help. We sat there, folding tiny onesies, and she said, looking at me, "Thank you, Raphael, for everything. You didn't have to do any of this." I stopped, looked at her, and said with all the sincerity I had, "I did, because you deserve it, and because I never stopped caring about you." Julia fell silent, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of something I couldn't decipher. That night, as I lay in my bed, I realized something terrifying and wonderful at the same time. I still loved Julia. Maybe I never had stopped. I had just been too blind an idiot to realize that what I had with her was what I had spent the last 4 years searching for in everyone else. In her 8th month of pregnancy, Julia started having Braxton Hicks contractions. They were false alarms, the doctor explained, but they scared her every time. During one of these episodes, in the middle of the night, I heard her groaning in pain in her room. I ran over and knocked on the door. "Julia, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she replied, but her voice was tense. I opened the door slowly. She was sitting on the bed holding her stomach, breathing deeply. "Can I come in?" I asked. She nodded. I sat on the edge of the bed. "Is it a contraction?" She nodded. "But the doctor said it's normal, it'll pass." I stayed there with her in silence until the pain subsided. When she relaxed, she looked at me and said softly, "I'm scared, Raphael." "Scared of what?" "Of not being good enough. Of not being able to take care of this baby on my own. Of not being the mother he deserves." I took her hand and my voice came out firm. Julia, you're the strongest woman I know. You've been through things that would break anyone, and you're still here, fighting, surviving. You're going to be an amazing mother, and you won't be alone. I'll be here. She squeezed my hand. Why? Why are you doing all of this for me? I took a deep breath, and finally I had the courage to speak the truth. Because I love you, Julia. I always have.
I was just an idiot who didn't know how to value what he had. The silence that followed was deafening. Julia looked at me, her eyes wide, tears starting to fall. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Don't say something like that if you don't mean it." "I mean it," I said, my voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve for you to even look at me after everything I've done. But I need you to know.
I love you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for every second of pain I caused you." Julia started to cry, and I didn't know if it was from anger, sadness, or relief. She pulled her hand away from mine and covered her face. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said, between sobs. "You hurt me in a way I never imagined anyone could."
You made me feel like I was worthless." "I know," I said, my own voice choked. "And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But if you give me a chance, just one, I swear I'll prove to you that I've changed." Julia was silent for a long time. Then she wiped her tears, looked at me and said, her voice tired but sincere, "I can't promise you anything now, Raphael, but I can try. Slowly."
I nodded, and a shaky smile appeared on my face. "Slowly is good. I'll wait as long as it takes." That night, I left her room with a lighter heart than I had had in years. I had a chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. The baby was born on a Sunday morning at the end of March. Julia started having real contractions at 5 in the morning, and we rushed to the hospital. I held her hand throughout the labor, wiped the sweat from her brow, whispered words of encouragement. When the baby was finally born, a beautiful boy with dark hair and wide-open eyes, Julia cried with relief and joy. I cried too. She held the baby in her arms, looked at me with a tired but radiant smile and said, "Thanks for being here." "I'll always be here," I replied, and it was a promise. Julia named the baby Miguel. When she came home, the penthouse had been transformed into a makeshift nursery. I had bought everything the baby could possibly need, from diapers to a top-of-the-line crib. Julia was speechless. In the first few weeks, I watched her transform. She was an incredible mother, patient, loving, devoted. She'd wake up in the middle of the night to feed him, change diapers with a smile even when she was exhausted, and sing lullabies in a sweet, tired voice. And I helped in any way I could. I'd hold Miguel when he cried, keep Julia company during those late nights, and run out to buy whatever was needed. Gradually, without even realizing it, we had become a family, not official, not on paper, but in our hearts. Julia started looking at me differently, with less suspicion, more tenderness. She began to smile more, to laugh at my bad jokes, to accept my hugs. And I, for the first time in years, felt complete. 6 months after Miguel was born, on a quiet evening, Julia and I were sitting on the couch watching the baby sleep in his crib nearby. The TV was on at a low volume, but we weren't really paying attention. Just looking at Miguel,
Marveling at his every breath. "He's perfect," Julia whispered. "He is," I agreed. "Just like his mother." Julia turned to me, and in her eyes was that sparkle I hadn't seen in so long. "Raphael, I need to tell you something." My heart pounded. "You can say it." She took a deep breath. "I forgive you. It wasn't easy, and there were days I was still angry, but I forgive you."
Because I saw you change. I saw you become the man I always knew you could be. and I realized I still love you. Maybe I never stopped. Tears streamed down my face before I could stop them. I took her hand, squeezed it tightly, and said, my voice choked with emotion, "I won't let you down again, I swear." "I know," she said, and she smiled. And then we kissed. For the first time in 4 years, I felt her lips on mine, and it was like coming home after a long journey through the desert. 3 months later, I proposed. It was simple, just the two of us and Miguel on the penthouse balcony watching the sunset over the city. She said yes. We got married at the courthouse. No party, no fanfare. Just us, the baby, and the certainty that this time it was forever. Today, 2 years later, I look back and see the man I was, and I regret every selfish choice I made, but I'm also grateful because I had to lose Julia to learn her value. I had to see her suffering to realize how strong she was. I had to almost lose everything to understand that success without love is worthless. If this story touched your heart in any way, I ask you from the bottom of my heart, please subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't just tell stories, we create a space where real people share real pain and find comfort in knowing they're not alone. Every subscription helps me continue this work, and I promise you'll find a story here every week that will make you reflect, cry, smile, and most importantly, feel understood. And before you go, do me a favor. Write in the comments one word, just one, that sums up what you felt listening to this story. It could be hope, it could be strength, it could be pain. It doesn't matter what it is, because every comment down below becomes a chain of support for someone who might be going through the worst phase of their life and needs to know that there are people who care. Write, "This story moved me," if you felt something. Thank you so much for staying with me this far. It means more than you can imagine. Give this a like if this story resonated with you, and I'll see you in the next story. I'll be waiting for you here.